rock solid. Oh, you lovers, stand with me. Rise in spirit, oh, you lovers, rise in me. Sing together, oh, you lovers, sing with me.
Hello everybody, and welcome to Elemental Castings. My name is Thorn Coyle, and this is my periodic, usually bi-monthly, tour through the elements of life. Let's all take a breath together. Let's call on the sacred, basic elements that are the building blocks of all other things: air, fire, water, earth, and ether, or akasha, or spirit. Holy Mother, in whom we live, move, and have our being, from you all things emerge, and unto you all things return. And today we will be working with the primal element of fire, the element of heat, the noonday sun, of fuel being consumed and burning brightly. It is the element of will. And instead of a guest today, I'm going to do a little bit of reading from Kissing the Limitless, and then I took questions off of Facebook this week, and I'll be attempting to explore some of those questions with you. Defining will. Epictetus said, "Put your principles into practice now. Stop the excuses and the procrastination. Decide to be extraordinary and do what you need to do now." Every moment of every day we have a choice. Epictetus was born into slavery, yet was not a slave within himself. What are we slaves to? Can we cease our slavish behavior? Yes. All it takes is one deep breath and remembering. We can act other than this. We can stop complaining. We can be more fully who we are. All of these acts and small decisions help to build will, which is the core ingredient to our magical work. It is also the core of successful artists, business people, scientists, and athletes. Most often, anyone who has achieved success beyond the ordinary bounds of having basic food and shelter has developed his or her will. Will is willingness. Will is the action of our intention. It is the coupling of a goal with discipline and skill. Will without skill is ineffective. Skill without will has little aim. We must make explicit the difference between an open, strong will and constricted use of force. Will is not machismo. Force is used in the absence of true power, which is a power from within that lends the ability to act in the world. Internal power is a welling up of strength that knows itself and needs no one else to define it, nor does it need to fight over scraps, because it has enough. If it does not have enough, it knows the steps needed to get what is necessary or desirable. All the political infighting that goes on in human groups denotes a real lack of power. Those who hold power wield it wisely. Those who wield force are not good leaders. Sometimes, because developing will requires discipline and commitment, we enter into a punitive relationship with ourselves. In general, this is not helpful. By use of force and punishment, we can train ourselves to perform amazing feats, but to what end? The result is a person who is used to force and becomes brittle and lacking in compassion for self and others. Compassion, not pity, is a true sign of power held well. Compassion means the ability to see others as they really are, rather than trying to fix them or fight them. A punitive nature does not foster any deep empathy, and can train us into a hardness that will break others and ourselves given enough time. We develop will by making a commitment and fostering discipline. At the root of discipline is the word disciple, one who takes on the teaching. Everything we commit to should be a teaching for us. We can become disciples of our lives. There is no concept of punishment here. Rather, we are showing up for ourselves and our work, and we are building muscles slowly and over time just as we would in a gym lifting weights. We don't start out lifting 200 pounds, rather we add weight slowly as our muscles develop. There is satisfaction in stretching beyond our immediate comfort levels to work on a long-term goal. However, the punitive aspects of discipline often enter in when we bite off more than we can chew by setting ourselves up with grand projects whose execution is way beyond us. If we instead figure out what the next step is, we can take that step and move forward until we gain enough momentum to find some ease and joy in the project. I'm going to read another section now because of the sorts of questions that came up on Facebook from some readers. This section is called Feeding Our Will, and it starts off with a quote from Marcus Aurelius. To be thus strong enough to refrain or consent at will argues a consummate and indomitable soul. In learning to move from will and desire, in developing both, we establish a firm core. Living from this core itself frees us to choose our own thoughts and actions. Until that time comes, we are prey to the morals and ideals of those outside of us. Others dictate our behavior, or we fall back on rote morality in order to make our decisions. This does not allow for ease of action or individual choice. It does not make presence truly available. Without will, practice, and our own ethical sense, we tend to fall back on some idea that may or may not apply to the situation at hand. In such cases, there is only reaction. We are not free to choose, and therefore not free to act. Without will, nothing happens of our own volition. We can only react to things that happen to us. Learning to act from our own wishes, desires, and sense of responsibility is paramount to our practice. Not doing so is an abdication of responsibility. It is a refusal to step forward and take our place. Simultaneously, sometimes we need to set clear boundaries in order to assert will. We must say no to patterns that undermine us, and sometimes to friends who want our lives to be easier in the short term, not understanding our strong wish to live for our larger aims. There are two types of will. The first one we have talked about already, that we learn to develop like muscles. It is saying, I'm going to do sitting meditation in the morning, or I'm going to dance class, and then doing so whether or not I feel like it. This sacrifices my small desire of the moment for a larger life's desire. Exercising will in these ways makes us stronger overall and enables us to meet our commitments and to grow spiritually. Without a developed will, we have no access to true choices, being instead pulled willy-nilly by every outside force, large or small. The other type of will, sometimes known as true will or the work of this God, is our connection to a larger life's purpose. This is knowing somewhere in ourselves that we are called to be healers and going to medical school or studying massage no matter what it takes. When we get an inkling of this, we can begin to shape our lives according to this purpose. Developing our smaller will serves our larger will. As a matter of fact, without small w will, large will is impossible. When we give ordinary tasks the added push of consciousness by turning them into will developers, our work becomes stronger. No longer do we just beat ourselves up saying, oh, I missed dance class again. I'll never get back into shape and may as well give up trying. We say instead, in this moment, I missed an opportunity to work on strengthening my will, but new moments are always arising. Changing our attitudes in this way makes our actions sacred. We aren't just trying to get fit in order to be more socially acceptable, but because we are attempting to connect ourselves to what we really want. This connection can become an acknowledgement that the immanent divine flow moves through everything. Developing will requires consciousness, and further development of consciousness requires engaged will. To be a warrior, a healer, an effective person, we need presence. It is my will that I be present while I write. It is part of my larger will that I write. It took exercising the muscles of my will to make my true will manifest in my life. I have always written, sometimes only when inspired, sometimes snatching moments here and there throughout the week, sometimes disciplined, sometimes haphazard, but there was always a return to this, for it is my will. This return eventually was bolstered by my spiritual practices that required presence. All of a sudden, not writing when I said I would was no longer something to beat myself up about because of a thought that I should be writing. Rather, my commitment to writing blossomed into a wish to expand as a full, vital human being because I wanted to commit to myself. Once I began working in this way, my commitment to writing flowed more naturally and easily, and I began to have greater success. The struggle did not disappear, but it became an ally rather than an obstacle, and the energy I used to expend combating myself was now made available for the work itself. That felt like the greatest success. All of a sudden, my work was deeply satisfying, and my will was strong and ready to couple with my desire. So there's something here about the fieriness of will. It's about a deep and strong connection to life energy, to the power that exists at the core of the earth, to the iron that's in our blood, to our heart pumping, to our connection to the sun, to eating the food that is part of the fruits of that sun. All of this is energy. Every time I'm attempting to develop will or connect to will, I'm connecting to energetic flow. If I'm blocking will, if I'm blocking my access to desire, if I'm not showing up, my energy tends to diminish. If I'm attempting to enact someone else's will, my energy often ends up feeling drained. And if will has spiraled into obsession, my will and energy gets eaten. So there's this constant balancing of fire. I need good embers to support the fuel of my life and my will. I need the right kinds of wood placed in a proper manner that will feed the fire, so I have energy to draw upon. If I'm choking my fire with too much wood, it's going to go out. Or if there's not enough fuel, or it's the wrong kind of fuel, the fire's not going to burn well either, and it's not going to end up feeding me. One thing that's often tricky about will development is that we need this sort of bootstrapping process to get things going. And that bootstrapping process can often involve us using the prop of should. I should do this or I should do that, rather than saying I want to do this and I want to do that, or I am willing to do this. Whenever we get into that word should, we are back in that punitive cycle I was writing about. And that punitive cycle is not an effective tool, really, in the long run to support our will and to enable us to become strong people. We want to be strong. We want to become autonomous over time. We want to be living and moving and acting and speaking and thinking connected with our will. So shifting language is one tool that's really helpful. Some of the questions had to do with exercises about connecting to will and developing will. And that's a first one. Actually, it's a great developer of presence and of consciousness rather than just rote habitual moving through our day, to choose our words a little more carefully. So can I start to notice when I hear the word should coming out of my mouth or resounding in my mind? And can I say, actually, is this what I want? And is this what I will? And if that answer is yes, then shift the language. Again, sometimes I may not want or will this, I may not want something in the moment. And then I want to fall back on should. But can I ask myself, is this in service of a larger want of mine? Is this the product of a deep desire? I sometimes say that desire is when want and need come together. So it's not just a random want, like, oh, I want some French fries, or I want to go to this concert. And it's not a need in the same way as some of the lower tier of Maslow's hierarchies of needs, clothing, food, shelter. But it's a soul need. It's a heart need, coupled with this want. So they shift into desiring, which is full access to life force, to that energy I was talking about. So even if I don't think I want something in the moment, is it a larger want? Is it a desire of mine? And if it is truly a desire, then I want to choose to set my intention into action and to reinforce my will. I want to say, yes, I am willing to take this step. I am willing to follow through. I am willing to show up to my own life and to my own wishes, my deep soul wishes. Then, even if we don't have a strong sense of what our larger will is, we're already en route to enacting it because we're following the calling of our soul. We're lighting the fire and we're following that torch. That's really important. So take a breath with me and just try to connect with what your soul desires in this moment. Maybe your soul desires greater physical strength. Maybe your soul desires to really work on your daily spiritual practice so you have more support. Maybe your soul desires to paint or to dance or to raise children. Maybe right now you're at the core spiritual question of how do I follow the dictum, know thyself? How do I step towards gnosis? Maybe that's what your soul desires right now. So, those are all components of larger will. And we don't yet have to pinpoint what that larger will is. What we need to do is to say, I feel some sort of longing. I feel some sort of call. I have some wish or desire. So how do I show up to that today? What's my work in this moment? The work in this moment is always the work of choice, and it's the practice then of enacting will. So my will needs to be developed like everything else. How am I going to access energy? And then how am I going to direct energy? So first, again, what's my next step? Well, I need to be physically stronger in order to do my larger will in the world, which is to travel and to teach and to write books and to speak. If I'm not physically strong, none of these things are possible. So in service of my larger will, of the work of this God, I'm going to continue connecting with also my smaller will and show up to physical training. I'm going to pay attention to what I'm eating. I'm going to make sure I'm getting enough exercise so that I have the life fuel to keep going. It's actually really simple. The reason it feels difficult to us is that just because something is simple doesn't mean it's easy, first of all. We do have to make the choice to show up. Second, it can seem difficult or not simple because we can allow ourselves to get clouded by our resistance. There are parts of our personality that feel like they're frightened of the extra responsibility that's going to occur in our lives, that's going to develop in our lives when we step more and more into our will and become more and more fully autonomous. And there are parts of us that say, you know what? I'd actually rather just sit here in the corner and not be very well noticed and maybe let other people take care of things. And I don't really want to connect to the work of my God, because what will that mean for my life? How's that going to change me? So there's a lot of resistance and a lot of clouding, and this can also cause confusion for us. So again, how do we connect? First, I always pause and I always take a breath. Air feeds fire, remember. And I connect with the stillness in my center, that place in my belly that's just between my navel and my pelvic bowl, and I breathe into there, and I just allow my attention to drop. Let's all do that right now. Allow your attention to drop into stillness, into the center, into your core. And that core of stillness is in your dantian. It's in the place around which all your energy systems flow. So in connecting to that stillness, not only are you giving yourself space, and not only are you paying attention, but you're also opening to connection to the flow of energy and of fire. So I do that. And then I say, what's my next step? Not who do I want to be in 10 years? Not what's it going to take to see this project I'm interested in through to the very end, but what's my next step? And what's my choice around that? And what am I willing to enact today in service to my divine nature? So simplify things. Take a few steps back if you need to. All right. I'm going to look at a question now. One interesting question that came up, someone asked, a community also has will. How do we grow the will of community? I consider hearing and feeling the words we will in the same way I hear and feel myself saying the words I will. I've heard individuals speak with such strength and commitment, but for some reason I rarely hear communities speak in this way. I actually think there are several communities that enact their will. Every time we see the mission statement of a nonprofit organization, that's their will, that's their intention, right? When a community has a mission, for example, I'm part of a community whose mission is to provide food for the homeless and working poor of San Francisco. It's a very clear mission. Our will as a community is clear. We know what needs to happen to enact our will, and we do it. Everyone shows up. So community will is interesting because in order for the will of the egregore to function, each individual has to show up in his or her will, right? So I have to say, it is my choice on this day of the week to show up at the kitchen and to do the work that's in front of me so that people continue to get fed. And we see this in activist groups. I'm thinking of a friend who's a forest activist in Tasmania, and his group's mission is very clear. It's to preserve the world's ancient forests and the animals that live there. And they know what methods they're willing to do, and they get together and enact their will together. So I actually think there are a lot of communities enacting will. We just have to remember that for that to work, every individual has to show up fully. I think when community will ceases to be functional, it's because the individuals are no longer really on board with the mission of that community. So in that case, the community, I think, needs to reevaluate its mission, its large will, or it may need to say, we need to dissolve now. I've also been involved in groups who had an initial mandate, and once we finished that, we tried to reconvene and find a new purpose, and we really were unable to, and we flopped around for a little while, and we finally had to choose to dissolve that group. So just as we need to pay attention to our own connection to energy and to what's feeding us and what's supporting our lives and what is supporting the continued enactment of our will, we need to pay close attention to that in community. How is the community functioning? Does the community feel sustainable? Another very important energetic question. Do I feel connected to the mandate, to the mission, to the will of the community? Do I see other people showing up filled with energy and interest to do the tasks at hand? If not, maybe it's time for a community meeting to reevaluate, to say, where are we heading? Are we really interested in this anymore? Have we come to the end of a natural cycle? So following the energy is always my test. Again, am I being fed energetically? Or is the community being fed energetically? Am I or the community feeling drained? Or are we feeling like our energy is being wasted or eaten? This also shows me, it's also an answer. Several questions came up about larger will, about what we call true will or the work of this God. When I am fully connected to the work of this God, to my divine work, to the flow that I'm supposed to be moving in, and it's clear, I say supposed to be simply because it means things are easier. If I'm going a direction that isn't really right for me, things get exponentially harder. What do I mean by that? I want to talk a little more here. It's not that things are always easy. It's not that there are never challenges, but it's that at base, there's energy there for me. At base, there's a certain amount of satisfaction and engagement. Even when I'm in the middle of a process that, wow, it feels challenging. And here's this steep learning curve at that juncture. Or here's just this one portion that is a little bit of a slog. And I really have to say, it's my intention to show up to this. How am I going to get a little extra energy to get through this patch that feels less engaging? But overall, my connection to the whole has to feel satisfying. I have to understand that, yes, I am still being fed. This happens with any long-term project. It happens with a marriage, happens when I'm writing a book, happens for people who are raising children, happens in careers, right? We reach a point where we say, yeah, this is difficult, and I'm still willing to show up to this. It's important to me. And I'm still getting fed on some level, even though it feels really extra challenging right now. Or I need to say, actually, this is draining me. I'm miserable. I'm sick all the time. Things are not going well in my life or my relationships. Maybe I need to reassess and reevaluate and say, actually, I need to choose strongly, which is another will-based thing. I need to choose to channel my energy in a different way. This brings me to another interesting question that several people had. I'll read the first iteration of it. How does one strengthen their will in the area of intentions or promises to self? For me, it seems much easier to fulfill my promise or intention when it is for others rather than for me. My lack of steady, firm, daily practice is a problem. Well, those who've listened to me enough or studied with me or read my writing knows, yes, I would agree, a lack of steady, firm, daily practice is a problem. It's our first step in helping ourselves. Practice doesn't have to feel good all the time. What practice does is it lends support to our lives. It lends support to our larger projects. And it gets me used to showing up every day for myself and for my connection to my God soul and to any other deity forms I'm in relationship with. If I'm not showing up for my primary relationship, which is my relationship with myself, I'm not showing up very effectively to any of my other relationships. And I think if we pause and look really honestly at our lives, we're going to see that that's true. Those of us who have a hard time committing to self and to doing self-care and to taking time for ourselves end up not being as effective in our relationships at work, with our other lodge or coven members, with our partners, with our children, with any of our other projects or activities. All of my relationships start with my internal relationship. I have to get clear on that. Then that's going to help my relationship with you, and then that's going to help my relationship with community and with everything else I'm trying to affect in my life. So, can I look at strengthening my will towards fulfilling promises to myself as the first step towards fulfilling promises to other people? It's just a slight reframing. I sometimes say, if you're not at least a little bit selfish, you are of no use to me, because I see that road you're going down. I see that it ends in burnout, in resentment, in codependence, and in all these things that end up not feeding our sparks, that end up not adding good fuel to the fire, that end up not connecting us to will and to intention. And it means we end up not making strong choices. And I always want to come from a place of choice. I want to move towards autonomy. So, how does one strengthen their will in the area of intentions or promises to self? Just like anything else, do it one time. Start right now. Take a breath, connect to yourself, and say, what is my intention? What am I attempting to build in my life? What kind of energy is needed for that? And can I be willing to show up for myself? If you don't commit to yourself, who will? No one. So start right now. As soon as you're done listening to this podcast, take 5 minutes, sit with yourself, connect with the center in your belly, and breathe. And make a promise to yourself to do that every day. And then pick something else. Say, I'm going to show up to this practice 6 days a week. We build up little by little. I always really encourage people to start with 5 minutes. We often want to start with these grandiose, big projects. Start with 5 minutes, then build up to 10, then 20 to 40 minutes. And if you fall off the wagon, go back to 5 minutes. Go back to your center. That is how we capture the spark of will and build it towards a flame. I'm going to see if there's any other. There are so many questions. There's far too many to deal with. Let me see. Sustainability, fire, and fuel. There's a few questions around that, including one that includes compassion as a source of strength to fuel the fire. So, getting back to the question about committing to self, can I open up some compassion for myself and say, I'm doing the best I can, and I want to keep showing up. That is also sustainable. So I've spoken to sustainability in a few different ways. One is to notice how your energy is running, to notice what's feels like it strengthens the energy and what feels like it drains the energy. Those are our first keys as to whether or not something is sustainable. If you feel like you have to hold up your whole organization by yourself, that's not sustainable. The organization needs to restructure. If the practice you've set for yourself feels entirely too onerous every single day, it's probably not sustainable. It's time to scale back. So again, always go towards what lends energy. Always go towards what feels like it's fanning the flames and helping to develop the fire. So one of the people that asked this question is a really busy mother. And parents always have a tricky time with practice because, of course, we think our children come first, and our children have to come first in a lot of ways, but still I'm going to stand firmly on the idea that your relationship with yourself is still first. So, what's your commitment to yourself to be more present to yourself so then you can be more present to your child? Is it 5 minutes of grounding and centering while you're taking a shower or brushing your teeth in the bathroom? That's what I often tell parents of toddlers. Get creative with that one locked door in the house, right? Whatever you can take, whatever steps you can take to make that first commitment is going to make all the commitments that cascade from that easier because you're building a system of support. That's what you want to do. You don't have to come up with a whole structure from the beginning, but just like building a fire, you start with some grass, dried grass, or maybe some crumpled up paper. Then you add some twigs, some kindling. Then you add some other pieces of wood. You get it going. You start the flame. You wait until it catches. And only when it's burning steadily do you add more wood. Do you add maybe larger piece of fuel, right? A bigger chunk of your project, a more ambitious goal. And if the fire goes out, you start over. You start small. Basics equal a strong structure that equal sustainable fire. I think I want to close with that and just take another breath together and drop into the still place in your belly once again. And I invite you to open the soles of your feet. Imagine you can just dial those open a little bit and open to the core of fire at the center of the earth. And I invite you to open the crown of your head just a little and open to the fire of the stars above you. And feel the fire in your mind and the fire in your heart and the fire in your belly and the fire in your sex. And breathe in energy. And I invite you to say a prayer right now that your own will grow stronger within you day by day to enact your divine will in the world and to help the will of all of those that are working to create beauty and justice and to spread love. Blessed be. And once again, we thank all the elements of life: air, fire, water, earth, and spirit. And we say, Holy Mother, in whom we live, move, and have our being. From you all things emerge, and unto you all things return. And as always, you can find me at thorncoyle.com. And I'm happy to announce that my temple Solar Cross will be attending the Parliament of World Religions in Melbourne this December, and I'll be teaching throughout Australia, and I'll be presenting at the Parliament. It's really an exciting event, and I hope a lot of you are able to tune in on the internet and read some of the reports from the Parliament. It's very important that world religious leaders are meeting at this time. So I also ask for your prayers and blessings on Solar Cross and on all the pagans and magic workers and, of course, every other faith that will be attending this event. And I wish you a pleasant day.
Stand rock solid, oh, you lover.